Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Digital Arts Show. I'm Jim Sirianni, your host. Thank you so much for joining us today. This show is part of the Digital Arts Festival that is produced by Center Stage Theater of Santa Barbara, California. The Digital Arts Festival shows stream nightly at 7 p.m., and you can find out more on the Center Stage website, centerstagetheater.org, and click on the blog tab. The purpose of the Digital Arts Festival is to create an outlet for artists of all kinds to share their work. And because of the shutdown and quarantine, many artists and performers suddenly found themselves with no way to show their work or to perform. And unfortunately, in some cases, the work these artists have created may never be seen by the public, which is too bad. So in an effort to find some sort of workaround, if you will, the Digital Arts Festival was created to help artists and performers connect with their audiences in a virtual setting. So we will have everybody from dance, theater, music, film, visual arts, poetry, storytelling, and much more. And again, you can learn more on the Center Stage website, centerstagetheater.org, and click on the blog tab. Today's guest is Brandon Whited. Brandon Whited is a dancer, choreographer, and teacher. He was born in Poughkeepsie, New York. He began dancing at the age of 10 after his family moved to North Carolina. He received both his high school diploma and BFA from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. Returning to his roots in New York, Brandon danced professionally with Steel Dance and Randy James Dance Works, just to name a few. In addition to his work in contemporary dance, Brandon has worked in musical theater as both a performer and choreographer with productions in North Carolina for the Cape Fear Regional Theater and in New York City for the Purple Repertory Theater Company. Following his professional career, Brandon received his MFA as a Distinguished University Fellow from the Ohio State University. And we're very excited to learn more about his career and his path. And so I'll just say at this point, welcome to the show, Brandon Whited. It's so great to meet you.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you as well.
Yes, in a virtual setting.
Yeah, we meet.
I know, exactly. We meet and, in quotation marks there. So Brandon, let me ask you, first of all, so you had a very interesting path from North Carolina to Santa Barbara. Tell us a little bit about your educational and professional journey.
Yeah, so I started in strip mall dance studios, as many of us have, starting with a lot of jazz and tap and hip hop, folk dance, ballet, and lyrical and things like that. I learned about modern dance when I went to this North Carolina Governor's School, which is a summer program that's sponsored by the governor. It's about 5 or 6 week program, and for academically gifted students, and then you can go for your area of interest. And so I went for dance, and that was the first time I was really introduced to modern dance by Deirdre Smith and Kelly Knox, my two teachers there, who were actually also alums of University of North Carolina School of the Arts years before. So they encouraged me to check that out for my senior year of high school. And so I ended up going there as a boarded student. It was only about 2 hours from home, so it was a nice distance away from the family to kind of strike out on my own, but still got to see them a lot, and they came to all my shows. And so I really, really dug in there. I had been doing a lot of musical theater back in Fayetteville at Cape Fear Regional from about maybe the age of 14. And going into School of the Arts, I was really put in a position where I had to choose because it was a conservatory. There's no time for really anything else. And so I decided to lean into dance in the kind of formative time at that age. And I just went full force into it. I ended up staying there for college and completing my BFA in 3 years, in addition to the senior year. And then I moved to New York City like a month after graduation from high school or college, excuse me. And I worked, worked in the restaurants, and I freelanced for a couple of different companies that you named. And then in 2008, I got an apprenticeship and later a contract with Shenway Dance Arts. And this was kind of a turning point for my career in terms of the scale and scope of the types of work I was doing, the festivals I got to perform in, touring around, being part of originating pieces. It was really kind of an incredible experience. I was there for about 5.5, 6 years. And then I got the bug to kind of reconnect with my craft, figure out what dance was in my life besides being a performer. And so I went back to grad school, and that led me to Ohio State, the Ohio State University, where I was there for about 3 years and studying. And that was an amazing experience. I didn't picture myself going to graduate school when I was out in the field, but I would never have traded those years. So it was really kind of an incredible shift back into myself and into my making mind and intellectual scholarly aspects of dance. And then after that, I applied out here to about 11 schools, and UCSB was the only West Coast school that I applied to, and that's the one that kind of stuck. So I've been here about 4 years now, and yeah, that's where we
Nice.
are.
Wow, that's an incredible journey, and we're so lucky to have you here in Santa Barbara.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're enjoying being on this end of the country as well.
Yeah, I'm lucky to
Um,
be here.
by the way, before I forget, I just want to make sure that our audience knows your information. And if you'd like to learn more about Brandon, you can check out his website, and that website is bscottdance.org. That's BSCOTT dance.org. You can learn more about Brandon on his website. So, Brandon, let me ask you, you have worked in both contemporary dance and musical theater, as we talked about. I would imagine those are two very different experiences as a choreographer. In one case, you're serving someone else's story, but in the other case, you're probably telling your own story. You are the storyteller. How do those experiences differ, or are there some similarities? And does it change your creative process working from one to the other?
Yes, absolutely. I think, it's interesting because most of my work in musical theater was early on in my life. So in my high school time, I, started as a dancer in the ensemble and then dance captain, and kind of started learning how the musical theater choreographers were crafting the work they were doing. And so I was learning from them in a way of kind of a lineage of there's a physical language to much of the musical theater canon, especially the classics. We did a lot of like Rodgers and Hammerstein, and we Music Man and The King and I and My Fair Lady and all those, and Grease and South Pacific. And so there was a kind of a pretty tight scope of the types of movement material that were not only desired but almost like expected. And so later on, when I moved to New York, I was working with Purple Repertory Theater Company and a couple other projects, a little bit more experimental, new works. And actually, they were works that weren't actually musicals. They were plays with music, with dance and movement. And so I think that process allowed me to kind of find something more of a flux between what the writer, director, and myself as a choreographer could bring to it. In one example, I actually got to kind of bring ideas for the score because there wasn't a score. It was so we sourced music from popular and classic things. And so that was also a way for me to like interject a kind of mood and tone into the work. But definitely in my contemporary dance work, sometimes it starts with concept, sometimes it starts with movement. So each process is kind of different in terms of what it wants or what it calls for, in terms of not only content, but also like steps of evolutionary process. It also depends who I'm working with, which I know maybe talk about collaboration later, but
Sure.
so yeah, I think one thing I really would love to do is revisit musical theater or experimental, dance theater work that has a little bit more room for invention in terms of the movement language. And yeah, like some inspirations for that would be like Bill T. Jones with Spring Awakening, or Hofesh Schechter with, oh my gosh, I'm blanking right now.
Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you this: in terms of musical theater, are there shows that are on your bucket list, if you will, that you want to do choreography for? Any musicals that are on the list, if you?
Definitely Spring Awakening. I've actually
Uh-huh.
been pushing it a little bit, trying to figure out the right time that we might be able to do it at school, at the university, or somewhere else. I just feel like there's a lot of space for a kind of rich physicality. I'd also love to, I really love the American Idiot. I know it was done recently, I think, in town.
Yes.
And I just loved it. I think I saw it like 4 times on Broadway. I kept bringing people to it because I was like, this is an amazing show. It's like nothing, and it also has like a really raw physicality potential in there, to kind of tap into that rock and angst and that,
Hmm.
my generation. And I would love to go back and do something like Hair. I think has a lot of also a lot of rich potential to kind of cross over into the contemporary idiom. Um, yeah, those are a few.
Nice. Very cool. And so I know that one of your areas of research and interest is the intersection of gender queer theory, dance theater, and contemporary dance. Tell us a little bit about that and how it impacts your work.
Yeah, a lot of I think it manifests in a couple different ways. Again, depending on the project and who I'm working with. In grad school, it was pretty concentrated, my work in those areas as it emerged. And a lot of it came from really like reading the dance history canon and and the theory and the things that we were looking at. And there was a really necessary and important kind of feminist thread that kind of drove a lot of that work. And it was a lot of Sally Baines and all these scholars that really were looking at the role of women and femaleness and femininity and feminist perspectives inside of the dance world, which has been very objectifying and tokenizing for women in the field. And so in doing that reading, I was thinking about this parallel track about what's the male experience, what's the masculine experience, or also broadening to include what's the queer and like gender fluid experience of someone in terms of dancers really being a conduit for types of communication, for meaning, for inhabiting different roles and archetypes and physicalities. And so I think it just all kind of started swimming around these ideas and thinking about this kind of these masculinity studies in parallel to feminist studies, not in opposition, which they're often thought of, but I really don't think, I think they share the same considerations about identity formation, representation, kind of subject-object dynamics, and visibility. And so I think that's really what it came down to. I also was really looking into the canon, looking into a lot of the work I was seeing, and there's very little, although it's changing now, even in the past 5 years, 10 years even, there was very little like queer work or gay male representation in contemporary dance and certainly in modern dance, with of course few exceptions. You have Mark Morris, Bill T. Jones, you have John Jaspers, you have some really prominent choreographers who are doing some of that work. But I just felt like, I don't know, that's something that was my way into finding something a little more personal.
So well, in a way to bring that type of dance to the public in a way that it's normally not brought to the public.
Exactly, yeah. And just, I think it kind of, it's like a snowball effect, because you do one piece where maybe the dancers, the two or three or more male dancers are in one space, moving in ways that you might not see them, where a lot of our training is very limited in terms of like what's appropriate movement and what's like, this
Right.
is your types of movement and this is your types of movement. That's not true of everything, but there are a lot of instances where those kind of limitations are placed on training and movement material. And so just kind of liberating that expression of what types of movements, what qualities they can inhabit, and how they interact with each other, how they partner, bringing in vulnerability and tenderness and even eroticism, right? All those things, I would do one duet and people like, oh my gosh, I've never seen that before. And it wasn't that no one's ever done it, but it's that it's not prominent enough that people can see those types of interactions. And so then I think it just kind of gave me fuel to keep going and looking at it from different angles.
Right. So in a way, kind of also trying to push the envelope a little bit, or kind of bring it a little bit to the edge a little for the audience? Is that safe to say?
Totally. Yeah, I'm okay with people being, I'm comfortable with them being uncomfortable. And it's not to
Right,
say that gay or queer representation should feel uncomfortable, but it's less common, so some people do. Or
right,
intimate types of interaction in general might make people feel like, oh, am I supposed to be watching this? This is like, there's a voyeuristic kind of quality that can emerge when it's not as presentational. And so, yeah, I think just raising questions, offering um, alternative ideas about visibility and representation, I think those
right,
are all really good things, instead of just only giving them the comfortable, safe types of work that they're used
right,
to. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and also opening up a way to have a dialogue somehow with, you know,
for sure. Yeah.
opening it up for that. And by the way, for those of you watching, if you'd like to learn more about Brandon, you can check out his website, bscottdance.org. That's bscottdance.org, and we're speaking with Brandon Whited. He's a choreographer out at UCSB. So, Brandon, one of your recent projects was Boys Like Us. Can you talk to us about that project?
Yeah, absolutely. That project started as a smaller duet form. I was wanting to work with some friends of mine that live down in LA, Sam Wentz and Ryan Walker Page. They're two amazing professional dancers that I've known from New York, from American Dance Festival. All of our dance lives intersect, and then I realized that both of them were out here on the West Coast for different reasons. They found themselves out here, so I took a couple long weekends with some really concentrated work and went down to LA and started developing something. And I was like, let's just make something. I was really interested in kind of taking on like a gay male identity, or really kind of a coming of age sensibility, thinking about how identity is formed, how it can be a really solitary, isolating process of coming out and coming into yourself, and how the idea of finding connections can be very challenging in terms of how do you go about it, especially in times and places where safety is an issue, visibility is very low, and like how do you meet people? I'm talking pre-internet, so pre-dating sites and all of this stuff, pre-social apps. Growing up in North Carolina, it was very isolating in that way, and so just that sense of like wanting to connect, wanting to feel touch, wanting to have some meaningful interaction with someone, but not really knowing how to go about it. And so really that's where the dance stemmed from, in terms of finding that.
Nice. Very cool. And then now, because of the current social distancing restrictions, we are experiencing a lot of performances on video that were originally meant to be live. But the video experience, of course, is never quite the same as the live. How is that different for you as an artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are the things we were grappling with even before this, that sense of how do you how do you accurately portray, or to the best, the greatest extent possible, the visceral, human, energetic, raw quality of dance. It's ephemeral. We see it, it's gone, right? And even when we document it, it's never really the same. Energy is diminished. The lighting doesn't read as well. You can't hear the footfalls. You can't see their sweat. You can't smell even in the space the work of the dancer, which we don't always talk about smell when we're in performance. But I think that sense of like, I don't know. There's just this unmistakable place that you are put in when you're in a theater space or an alternative space, any kind of live performance. Yeah, and so that's something for sure. And then you have the variation of, is it a documentary style where it's just static and wide, and which a lot of am able to capture, it has to kind of be in that way without budgets for moving cameras and editing and multiple angles. And a lot of the times we did in grad school have like a close angle and a wide angle, maybe a panning, zooming, so you can kind of choreograph the editing of the dance to be a little bit more like the experience
More.
of live.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so
a lot of
it's
those
different.
quiet moments are lost. A lot of the still, quiet, soft, nuanced moments might get a little lost because they don't radiate in the same energy that that you'll see when you're watching it live. And that's actually true, I think, of potentially of the Boys Like Us video. The beginning is very quiet and still. And so it's interesting. It brings up issues of, of that. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing like doing a live performance, whether it's dance or theater, anything like that. It's just
Yeah.
you have to be live. You have to have the exchange between both the audience members and the performers. You kind of
Yeah.
need that for it to really work.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how have you been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis? I imagine it's very challenging to teach dance through Zoom. I know some of our other dance instructors have had difficulties and challenges with it. What's been your experience with Zoom and everything?
Yeah, I think we're all in this boat right now. I think it does offer opportunities for creativity and adaptability, ingenuity. Um, I think it's pretty amazing how quickly the dance educator cohort, the broader global dance educators um, collective has kind of come together to share information and tactics and ideas, and so I think that's really made a big difference in the rapid way that a lot of people were able to mobilize and either switch online or quickly plan something that was going to be we're on the quarter system, so we were right in finals from winter and about to be in spring break when all this kind of the lockdown happened. And so we had to plan 10 weeks to be online, where some people were finishing up a quarter or a semester. So it has different challenges. I think for me, I'm teaching choreography right now to our sophomores actually, but I'm teaching a class that would normally happen fall of their junior year, because the one that I was slated to teach was kinetic lab, and that's for the juniors at the end of their junior year, where they're supposed to be go on your own, make a dance, come back. It's more of a choreographic workshop, and it's focused on small group form. So that was pretty much impossible to do under the circumstances. So we swapped them, and so I think the challenge has been a lot with the students finding their own creativity and motivation under the circumstances. A lot of them are really feeling the isolation of it. There's often a kind of physical depression that can happen when you're dancing so much and then all of a sudden you're not. And I think a lot of them are feeling that. So
Right.
I've been working a lot to give them kind of small tasks, working really methodically about how we can develop material using formal devices. So really getting into the nuts and bolts of composition rather than trying to be in a space of I'm going to make the best dance possible in this moment, right? And so it's a little bit more of practice of crafting. And so I think that's been helping them a little bit. We're looking a lot at gesture and nuance and development and scaling material. Obviously, space limitation has been a huge issue. Technical limitation is an issue. So that's kind of the way that I've been approaching it, thinking a little bit more about kind of a postmodern sensibility with making, using pedestrian movement, using chance procedures. So it takes the onus off of them to have to be like this huge creative being, and they can really just work on how to craft movement.
Right, right. Well, I wish we could talk more about dance. I could talk all afternoon or all day, rather, with you about theater and dance. But unfortunately, we're just about out of time.
Okay.
But before we go, I just want to make sure everyone has your information one more time. If you were grabbing a pen earlier, Brandon's website, if you want to learn more about him, is bscottdance.org. That's BSCOTT dance.org. And to learn more about Center Stage, you can go to their website, centerstagetheater.org. Again, that's centerstagetheater.org. And if you're so inclined, I know it's a hard time for folks, but if you are so inclined to make a donation to Center Stage, you can certainly do so on their website, centerstagetheater.org. And if you want to learn more about what I'm up to, you can find me on social media as well, Jim on the Air on Facebook, at Jim on the Air on Instagram, and my podcast on Spotify and Anchor.fm, Jim on the Air as well. And Brandon, I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you everyone for watching and being a part of the Digital Arts Festival, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.